You're listening to Marketing Talks. Digital marketers and entrepreneurs talk about work, life, and more. Hosted by Daniel Moore.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Marketing Talks. This is the podcast of marketing product entrepreneurship online. I'm your host, I'm Daniel Moore. I'm a PPC expert. I'm specializing in paid media across the big ad networks, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Bing. And thank you for listening to us. I really appreciate it. Feel free to follow us, share feedback, and comment on the LinkedIn post and so on. Today, I host an international superstar in the content field and storytelling. I'm proud to present Michal Eisikowitz, who is the owner of a boutique agency that helps B2B SaaS brands replace yawn-inducing website copy with crisp messaging that resonates. Michal, how are you? Welcome.
I am good. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy that you're here, and we have a bunch of topics to discuss, and I can't wait to deep dive into them. So we've been talking for a while, and I got to know you through your juicy LinkedIn profile, and now it's time for you to get to introduce yourself to our listeners. So tell us a bit, who are you, Michal Eisikowitz, and which are your brands? What are your services, and who's your target audience?
Sure. So I'm the founder of michaleeisikowitz.com. It's a boutique copywriting agency that specializes in positioning and messaging for B2B tech brands. And I'm also the founder of Copy Tribe, which is an instructor-led copywriting program that has trained over 400 copywriters and freelancers to date in the foundations of copywriting and content writing.
So you specialize particularly in B2B SaaS brands. Could you elaborate a bit more, like how did you get to this field, or like to storytelling in general, and then particularly to that side of the industry, B2B SaaS?
Yeah, sure. I completely fell into this industry by accident. I was pursuing a degree in speech language pathology, a master's, and I wanted a job on the side. I got an intern position as a marketing assistant in a publishing company. And that's when I discovered that A, I love writing, and B, I can get paid to do it, and this can be a real job. So it all snowballed from there, and I ended up working as an in-house agency copywriter for about 10 years before going out on my own. So I started as a solopreneur and slowly built up a team. Now I have 5 people working for me in this agency. And I think the reason I gravitated to B2B SaaS brands is for 2 reasons. Number one, B2B brands generally rely, or SaaS brands in particular, rely very much on their website copy to do a lot of their selling for them. So a lot of their sales process is online, and therefore they place a lot of importance, rightly so, on their copy, and they're willing to invest in it. And so they're very motivated to get their messaging right. So that's number one. And number two, I've just found that tech founders are a pleasure to work with. I've just really enjoyed working with so many smart, savvy, growing entrepreneurs, and I have a lot of fun with my clients.
Right. Okay, that's nice. And did you have you been to journalism before? Was it like you came from the journalism side of things before?
Yeah. So after I worked at this publishing company for a couple of years, so then by then I had earned my degree, and I was officially a certified licensed speech language pathologist. So I started working part-time in that field, because when you invest $30,000 in a degree, you feel like you have to work in it, even though my heart was kind of already in writing. Like I had been bitten by the writing bug. So on the side, I moonlighted as a feature writer for several magazines. So I did a lot of journalism, and then I also was doing this agency copywriting at some point. I was basically all over the place. There was a time where I was juggling 3 totally different jobs as feature writer, as speech language pathologist, and as agency copywriter. And I felt like I was mastering none of them because my brain was so scattered. So about 10 years ago, or I should say 8 years ago, I decided to do an experiment and to drop my other jobs for 1 year and go all in on this copywriting thing. And it was an amazing experiment, and I haven't looked back. So that's how that evolved.
That's super, that's inspiring. I think generally speaking today in the millennials era, where people normally hold, like they do a bunch of things simultaneously, and they hold several positions in parallel, and then they try to do this juggling thing. But you decided to go on one specific field out of three that you just mentioned, in order to specialize, like to deep dive into it. Very inspiring, very nice point of view. So during 2018, you started Copy Tribe. So you went like to another side of the business that's more in the like educational side of things. What made you want to transfer your knowledge to others, and to educate others with the skills that you gained?
Yeah, so it was a complete experiment, also something that we tried out as very much a beta idea. My first cohort only had about 20 people in it. And I think the reason I felt so driven to create this program for new copywriters is because I had been lacking it so acutely myself during my journey. There was no excellent foundational program that would give me all the skills I needed to get started as a copywriter in a very systematic, methodical, structured way. Like, you can learn anything on Google today. There's endless amount of content out there, but that's exactly the problem. You just get overwhelmed in all the million blog posts that you could read on any given topic, and you just drown in this content. So my goal was to create a program that taught new copywriters everything they needed to get started and nothing more, so that they could actually get through the material, get the core skills, and start working without feeling overwhelmed or paralyzed.
Right. And this is something that you feel like contributed to yourself also as a service provider, rather than just rather than an educator?
Yeah, I've definitely learned to, in the process of selling all my different educational offers, so I've improved my selling skills, my copywriting skills, my team's copywriting skills, because instead of just writing for, let's say, websites, I mean, we're doing all the different kinds of copy for the offers we're selling as a business. And I think also being in the role of educator has helped me talk to clients in a clearer, more pointed way and explain concepts or explain my strategy or rationale in a way that is easier to absorb.
And like, who's normally attending a Copy Tribe? Like, who's doing that program? Who's it normally for?
So either a very talented writer, often has some kind of professional writing background, but wants to monetize their writing skills and actually start earning more money and becoming an official, confident copywriter. And then we also have a lot of like dabbling copywriters who have dabbled here and there. They've taken on some copy projects, but they don't feel confident because they've been trusting mostly on their gut or random blog posts until now. And they want to learn things in a much more proper way. They don't want to feel like a fraud anymore. We've also had a couple of service providers and business owners who've joined the program over the years because they realize that they write a lot of copy in the course of running their own businesses, and they want to be able to get those foundational skills so that either they could write small pieces of copy on their own without having to hire a copywriter every single time, or so that they can more effectively guide a copywriter in writing for their business.
So business owners as well, and I feel like it's a skill that I think everyone who starts any kind of entrepreneurship need to have in order to communicate the value of what they have, the product, their service, whichever. And do you need obviously to be like English native speaker writer in order to join the program?
No, most of our members are native English speakers, but we've had a few from other countries who have used the ideas and the material in the program to write in their native languages. So whether that's Spanish, Italian, German, the fundamentals are the same.
That's brilliant. Okay, that's good to know. So besides, let's go back a little bit to your core service. So you help companies, specifically B2B SaaS companies, to focus their messaging, their storytelling, and to communicate what their app is doing better than the competitors, or just good in general. And you work with normally founders or like head of marketing. Correct me if I'm wrong, of course.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So this is your the person on the other side that you're working with. Do you work with bigger teams, smaller teams? Does it vary?
Typically, like 5 to 10 people on the team.
Okay. And when do you think is the sweet spot of working with Michal, like with your team, your team members, versus hiring someone in-house? Like where the transition normally happens or need to happen?
So I think a lot of it will depend on your content strategy and your content needs. So if a big part of your marketing strategy is creating consistent content and distributing that content across various channels, so that's when you may want to bring someone in-house, because then you'll have constant content that needs to be created and refined. If your focus right now is more on the copywriting part of things, so website copy has like a lifetime. It has a what's the word? It has a shelf life of at least.
It's not evergreen,
right? I mean, I would say 2 to 3 years on average, with some tweaking. And generally, brands have to evolve after 3 years. But if you're working, let's say on copywriting for your website, you don't need to have someone in-house, because that can be done really strategically once every 3 to 4 years, and then you redo it at that point. So it depends a lot on your marketing strategy and on the frequency with which you put out content.
Do you see different frequency per different types of SaaS? Let's say, I don't know, like software that is more in particular niche industry needs to have more content generated in order to, gain some organic traffic or organic exposure and whatnot, versus other industries of like software industries that need less content?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think some of it will depend on the nature of the product. So, for example, I worked with a company that has a very niche product, a very expensive product, and if they make 15 sales over the course of the year, then that's enough. Like, that generates enough revenue for their whole team. Very high ticket offer. So I think for those products, while content is important, it's going to be a lot more about the sales process and the consultations over time and the personal one-to-one relationship with meeting with these people and really seeing if the product is a good fit for this brand. I'm thinking of like lower ticket offers where you have a larger audience, and I can see content being more important, more central, consistent content being more central to those brands.
It's actually what you would expect. Okay. Normally, working with founders, marketers, and I believe in both ecosystems, like Israel, US markets. Correct me if I'm wrong. What are the main, let's call them issues or mistakes, given that you're working with smaller teams that tend to do things like all in, and everyone like mostly like everyone are doing everything kind of thing. What are the common messaging / storytelling mistakes or things to be improved that you witness done by founders, marketers that you work with regularly?
Great question. So I'll start with a bigger issue, like a more holistic issue that I see, and then I'll zoom into some more granular issues. So the big issue I see is what I call the copycat effect, where you have a founder community that, as much as there are so many startups across the world, at the end of the day, it's relatively tight-knit, and founders are constantly looking to other founders, other brands to make sure they're on the right track. So what is so-and-so doing? What does their website look like? And the result is 7,000 SaaS websites that look and sound the same. Same messaging, same predictable structure, same generic illustrations of those guys in big wide pants, same jargon heavy copy that makes people zone out. So words like disruptive, synergize, innovative, save time and money, like it just sounds the same. So nothing is memorable, nothing is standout. So particularly in more mature categories where you have to differentiate at the brand level, this kind of copycat messaging and design is problematic because you give me no reason to remember you as a brand, to feel any kind of emotional connection to you as a brand. Now, I'll concede that sometimes a particular messaging structure or strategy is very effective, and that's why so many brands attempt to use it. But the point is that there has to be some kind of strategy. The idea is instead of just copying competitors or looking at what's done, to try to think what really makes the most sense for your product and your audience, given their level of awareness around your product and the problem you solve. So that's the big picture issue that I see.
Right. So that's if you were to put it in one sentence, you would say copycatting. Like taking different, let's say, messaging that you see on competitor site and just adopting it to your site while using perhaps similar jargon, etc.
Yeah,
what is
not even copying the messaging, but sometimes copying the structure or copying the design or copying the layout without strategy. In other words, there's no good reason for you to do it that way. Perhaps for your brand and your audience, they need a different hierarchy. They need a different structure. But because everyone is doing that way, there's like this feeling of I have to do it also.
Okay. And you mentioned using jargon. What's your standpoint, your point of view about using jargon generally, or let's say maybe specifically in social media versus on the website itself? How do you see it?
So jargon should only be used if that's what your audience wants to hear. So if it's a very niche product and they are looking for certain phrases that will signal to them that you understand them, you understand their industry, you understand their unique problems, then go ahead, use that jargon. But stay away from words that just clunkify the sentence and complicate the sentence without adding that value, without making your readers' eyes light up and be like, they understand me. So let's say you're selling a product to web developers, and obviously they have tons of jargon in that space. So for them, in that case, you would want to intentionally use certain phrases to make them feel like, this is what I need. But words like, when I say jargon, I'm also referring to like words like that are more, not related to a specific niche. Yeah, like buzzwords and overused cliches that have become, they've been used to the point where they've lost all meaning. So everyone says them and therefore they're dead.
Let me make it harder for you. I want an example.
Revolutionary, disruptive, best in class, world class, proven. So without specificity to back up these claims, they really mean nothing. People's eyes.
And everyone can say it about themselves. Like everyone can say, we've been proven this and that, or I don't know, this and that using AI, for instance.
Yeah, advanced innovative methods. Like really, does anyone want to read about advanced innovation at this point?
Yeah, like what is it about? What's innovative?
Yeah, just
Okay.
talk to me. Just be a little bit more conversational. Just tell me the details without all this fancy introductory language.
Yeah, I feel like I know what you're talking about, and you often, more often than not, actually, you see it in paid advertising, rather, I don't know, yeah, probably mostly anywhere. I would say LinkedIn, Facebook ads, Google ads is more like straightforward, but then on the other platforms where normally you try to disrupt, the scroller, the user from scrolling, and you need to get their attention somehow. But it makes perfect sense for web messaging, for any type of messaging actually. So when we spoke before, when we prepared ourselves for this episode, you specified a concept that I want to focus and talk a little bit about, and that's hierarchy. In particularly in messaging, but perhaps it's also relevant to content in general. Why don't you tell us a little bit, what is it, hierarchy? Why is it important, and how do you go about it? When you, I don't know, start working with a new client, whichever industry, whatever they do, how do you even go about it? Like, how do you start? And yeah, please.
Sure. So hierarchy is the order in which you say things. So, for example, you're looking to raise $10 million in capital. You wouldn't go ahead, approach an investor and say, hey, we're an awesome brand. We have 10,000 customers already. Can you give us $10 million? You build up your case point by point, layer by layer. You give context. Or another extreme example, someone approaches you with a testimonial and says, hey, look, this testimonial shows that we saved our client 15 grand. So you should consider hiring us today. And you're like, what? Hiring you for what? What do you even do? I know nothing about you. So that's the idea when talking about your messaging, to figure out where is your prospect right now? Where are they at? And building up the conversation in a way that's most intuitive for their level of awareness and their level of readiness. So throwing social proof and stats and numbers and case studies at customers who don't really understand what you do yet is meaningless. It's meaningless without that context. It has to be rooted in the understanding of the value you bring to the table. Then it becomes meaningful. So website copy. How much do customers already know about your category? Is it a new category? What do they know about your product? Do they already know about this kind of solution? Do they know your product exists? Are they comparison shopping? Do they only know about the problem you solve and not about potential solutions? Maybe they don't even know that much about the problem, or maybe they're not fully aware of the problem and you want to do a little bit more educating in that regard. So all these questions are what you want to consider when structuring your website copy, because that's going to influence what you start with, how you lead the conversation, and then how you build that conversation through the page.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds to me that it correlates. It also resonates with the traditional marketing funnel, like awareness, consideration. Yeah. It sounds like it's probably the same thing, for like in a wider aspect, in a more like a general aspect of how the company positions itself, like across the industry and amongst all the other companies that do the same thing, and what differentiates them in essence. And like how often do you see like incorrect hierarchy when you attend to, when you start working with a new client? What is a common mistake in a incorrect hierarchy, if it makes sense?
Yeah. So say you're a new product in a relatively new category, you would not want to lead with your differentiator, because your typical customer or prospect doesn't really know you have competition yet, even. They're first learning about your solution. So that's not the place where you would want to lead, why you're better than the others. That's not what they need to hear. What they need to hear first is, what problem, what big expensive problem are you going to help me solve? Another common mistake is jumping straight into the features and the technical specifications of the product for a less aware audience that, again, needs to hear more about the ROI and the outcome before they get nitty gritty and want to hear more details.
Those are points that I didn't really think about myself. So it's very educating. And like normally you would go to a website and then you can easily, crack the industry and understand like, all the who's and who's if you go to some sort of a comparison sector of the site and you try to understand like this product versus the other product before you even get to know them. You already have their names and like a breakdown of what they do better, like some sort of like a comparison, chart. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense that you shouldn't put it out in the front for someone who's a new visitor, who's haven't even seen anything about the industry itself. While you actually need to focus on your own product.
Yeah. It's just premature and potentially off-putting to start talking about competitors for those people. And again, you can have a dedicated comparison page that's a landing page for people who are Googling your product versus the competitor, because you may have some prospects who are more aware. So go ahead and drive them to that dedicated landing page that has the comparison in depth. But that kind of comparison doesn't necessarily have to be on your homepage where the majority of your traffic is less aware.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
I mean, on the flip side, if you are dealing with a heavily saturated category, a very mature market, then you absolutely need to lead. Your message needs to start with your differentiators, and that has to be the core part of your message. Why in the world should I choose you over everyone else?
I think there's one major exception I can think about, and that's when you sell subscription to a product that's very fundamental in the organization. Take, I don't know, for example, a client that I used to work with. They had like an SMTP that was meant for heavy emailers, like heavy email senders. And without, like, it's not like you wake up in the morning and you decide on, using such a product, because obviously you've done email marketing before and you just migrate from one product to another. So in that case, it would probably make sense that your customer, is using something different, and then all they need to do is to migrate to your solution. So you do have to encourage them or educate them. How are you doing things better, or how can you save money for them, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I definitely agree with you that from scratch you wouldn't want to put all your competitors in, at the front and just give the user idea of who all the other operators are. Yeah, mm-hmm. That's totally. It makes sense.
I mean, I don't see what you just described. I don't see that as an exception, because in that case, the customer really is a more aware customer. They are at the comparison shopping stage. So that's absolutely what they need to hear.
Yeah. When you describe it like that, you're absolutely right.
And also, just to add, like a company with that kind of model where they're pulling customers from competitors, they also need a big part of their messaging has to be addressing the objection of, is the migration worth it? Like, what's this going to involve? And is it going to set me back? And is the learning curve going to make it not worthwhile for me to do this migration?
I agree. It sounds like it's more in like it's not something, it's very customized per client, what their needs are, and so on and so forth. But particularly in B2B SaaS, where some heavy programs, heavy software, they need, like, you need to do some sort of configuration, onboarding, and whatnot that might take a while. But I totally agree. Yeah, it makes sense. Let me ask you. So you mentioned the like a lot of stuff going on a company's homepage, where most of the traffic is going through, and that's where they first land. Do you do also landing page messaging, like pages that are not indexed and marked as known follow, to get like initial traction with users coming from either paid advertising or partners, collaborations like co-marketing, and so on and so forth? Do you work also on landing pages?
Yeah, absolutely. And landing pages are really a marketer's dream because they follow all the rules of marketing to a T. The rule of one. So there's one reader, one big idea, one promise, one offer. You know exactly who is going to be visiting that page. So you can craft very pointed, targeted messaging that meets that reader exactly where they're at. This is in contrast to the homepage, where the homepage is like an apartment building lobby. So you walk in and then you have to figure out where you want to go, the first, third, fourth, or seventh floor. And you're catering to people at so many different awareness levels and stages in the buyer journey. So it's much trickier. But a landing page done well can be super effective. So if you are driving traffic, that's like an opportunity to really work on the conversions for that page and to test different iterations and messaging until you get it right.
That's a good analogy with a building. I was thinking of it more like a shopping center, where you have the main entrance and then a bunch of shops and different different things to buy. Okay, and if you say, let's say, if you need to break it down, how much of your work is focusing on a company's homepage versus different let's call it touch points or touch bases or places where users can find their first interaction with the brand, like social channels, other landing pages, like a community forum, and so on and so forth.
So because we work with smaller brands, 70 to 80% of what we do is going to be focused on the website messaging, because they come to us ready to invest in their website. Like they really want to get that website done. So they're willing to spend the time and resources on it. And then very often, once we nail the website copy, then they will have their own people in-house use that copy as the basis for all the other channels. So it's like that becomes like their marketing messaging Bible, and then they can go ahead and tweak it across various channels.
I see. Okay. Maybe a question that needs to be asked, I think, at this point. How do you find the new artificial intelligence tools for content creation? Maybe messaging is a bit off topic. Like maybe it's a different thing, and it's pretty much 100% customized to the pixel level. But how do you find it for content? Is it good enough yet? Can it be used at all? Are you concerned with the changes it might get to the industry?
So I wouldn't say I'm concerned. I'm definitely keeping my finger on the pulse of how AI is developing and changing, because things will change rapidly. And even if they're not affecting me or my peers right now, they may start to do so. So very important to be open to adapt and embrace the tool and figure out how to use it and stay relevant. But number one, I think AI right now, as it is right now, is only useful for some forms of research and content writing. So blog posts, long form articles. In my experience with creative copy, brand positioning, messaging, all of that stuff is extremely limited and not useful. AI, the way it is right now, lacks very much a human touch. So everything it puts out, even with solid, specific prompts, is quite generic, cliche, not enjoyable to read. So it can serve as a good first draft, and then you can go ahead and spice it up and polish it and make it more interesting. But at least for me, for copywriting specifically, I found that it often takes me just as short to write from scratch as it does to redo this very mediocre piece of copy that it spat out at me. So I think that for businesses that are really on a budget and can't afford to hire a copywriter, I think AI can be a solid start for them. But for any brand that wants to really nail it with their copy, I do not see AI as any kind of serious threat at this point. And I look forward to using it as a supportive tool once it gets better. But personally, right now, I haven't found it to be this game changer at all.
I have to say I feel the same way. It's still not there. And I'm sure it improves as you speak, but yeah, you still feel like you're, speaking to a robot and not to it perfectly human machine.
I recently did a podcast interview, a video interview with a different company. And when I sat down, it was a live interview. When I sat down, I saw the list of questions that the interviewer had prepared. And it literally took me 3 milliseconds. And I turned to the guy and I said, "You got these on Chat GPT?" And he's like, "How did you know?" And I was like, "You can spot this stuff from a mile away. It's just completely generic."
Yeah, it's going to be, best friend to many of us. For coders, I've heard, it does great sometimes, but not there yet in content messaging. I feel the same way. Michal, now I need to, take it to a different angle. And we have a part of Marketing Talks where we ask every guest to tell us about an embarrassing case. In Hebrew, it's called fadicha. You know what it is. And the purpose of it is to, put the focus on, less serious stuff and just a bit day-to-day life, things that might happen to you during work or whatever, social scenario or whatnot. And yeah, tell us something embarrassing, a fadicha about yourself, and let's break the ice. Michal Eisikowitz.
You don't say.
Sure. So this happened when I was still at my speech language pathologist point in my career. I had just joined the new school where I was going to be working with a team of speech therapists like me, 20 other speech therapists. It was a very large network of schools. So they had this orientation for the staff at the beginning of the year, and we're all sitting in this room in a circle. And of course, I came a little bit late. I was the last one to join. So I kind of sat down right next to the speaker who had started introducing the meeting. And she's like, "Okay, so now we're going to go around and everyone's going to tell us a little bit about themselves." So I happened to be right next to her. So of course she started with me. And I go ahead and I start telling people about where I live and my husband and my kids and how I got into speech therapy and why I'm excited to work in this school. And at some point she's like, "Okay, we really just wanted to hear your name and where you live." And there's 50 people, and here I am all confidently telling my journey and my story, and they were not exactly interested in the Michal Eisikowitz extended intro at that point. So that was super embarrassing. And I remember thinking to myself, from now on, either I'm going to always avoid being the first one to present in these kinds of situations, and if I
that's
can't
a risky
avoid
position.
Yeah. Like, and if I can't avoid that, then I'm going to clarify, like, exactly what do you want me to say? Like, what is the nature of this intro? But that was definitely one of my more memorable, humiliating moments.
That's hilarious. Okay, that's great. Great, Fadiha, from you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I wanna keep asking you two more questions, like professionally, and I would love to have your point of view about it. Do you ever get to work with heavy spenders?
Mostly not. The brands I work with are generally smaller, newer. Um, we've done it with a few clients over the years, and for those kinds of heavy spenders, what the main difference really is a lot more variations, a lot more iterations, a lot more testing. So just a very tight feedback loop where we keep putting out new variations based on the feedback, based on what's working, based on what's not, and optimizing that message continually. Whereas for smaller brands where they're not necessarily getting that quality or volume of feedback, they have to test the messaging a little bit more slowly and in a less linear way over time.
Right. So it basically accelerates the learning process, and it allows you more, experiments to understand
Absolutely.
what the audience, is, what engages them, and how they respond to different messaging. Um, and I wanted to ask you about devices. Do you see different messaging needed? Do you see it required across different devices? Obviously, mobile, that is more instant and fast, and did you get like a shorter period of time to attract the user's attention versus desktop? There is more like work environment, and you have more time, to get the user to be engaged. Do you differentiate different devices, different messaging for different devices?
Yeah, we do. But I wouldn't call it differentiating the messaging as much as I would say it's keeping the messaging more concise and less copy heavy for the mobile version. So people who are skimming on their mobile device on the go, they're just not as heavily invested and they're not going to read as deeply as someone who's at their desk seriously considering a given offer. So really important to make sure that the mobile version of the site doesn't feel too text heavy, overwhelming, and doesn't require this endless scroll. So same messaging, but like trimmed, just a cut down version. Although most of the brands we work with are more like I noted B2B SaaS brands, so they're not as frequented by mobile visitors. I mean, you have to optimize it for mobile, but it's not like a B2C brand where they primarily are getting mobile traffic.
Okay, it's very common. It's not the first time, obviously, that I hear it. On the flip side, there are other, like, I normally differentiate between the different funnels. So if it's a self-service product, then more often than not, you would have a mobile funnel that is, that allows the user to actually start using the product, because they come from mobile, unless it's like a B2SMB kind of thing. But if it's lead generation without self-service funnel, then obviously you can capture the lead at any point, and from every device, and then onboard them on the desktop. But yeah, I totally agree with you that trimming and cutting to the point in mobile resonates and makes more sense. Lastly, Michal, I want to ask you. I'm looking at your impressive resume, and you've been through a lot in different places of communication industry, let's call it. And I bet you can share with us places where you get inspiration. Could be a podcast that you listen to. It could be a YouTube channel. It could be a figure that you follow on social networks, that share some, insightful stories from time to time.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I happen to love Rick Mulready's podcast. It's geared more to course creators, online entrepreneurs. He's just a really honest, authentic person who's done a lot of great marketing in his career, and I've been following his podcast for a while. I also want to single out a copywriter who I admire for specific reasons. Her name is Tarzan K. She's based in Canada. And she's more of a copywriter for course creators, and she specializes in launches. And I think the reason I want to call her out, even though she has a completely different style from me in terms of building a personal brand, like she's extremely, extremely open about her personal life in all her emails. So like sometimes you even like listen to an email and you're like, whoa, there's a lot of information. Or you read an email and you're like, wow. So I don't do that. That it's not my style at all. But what I admire about her is that she's extremely open about mistakes she's made in this entrepreneurial journey. And she shares the takeaways from those mistakes. And she shares like the process of her evolving as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. And I find that uniquely refreshing. And in general, I'm very drawn to people who are open about the often bumpy process of entrepreneurship and are okay with letting the curtains down a little bit and not pretending that everything is always smooth sailing.
Yeah, transparency. Transparency is it's very appealing. Not to see only success all the time, and it looks fake, it sounds fake, and authenticity and I think transparency are definitely blessed. Michal, I really want to thank you for being here. And I enjoyed having you a lot, and I learned a lot. I wish you, success and involvement and prosperity, obviously. And that was very joyful. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Great conversation.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys for listening to this episode of Marketing Talks. I hope to see you in the next episode, and feel free to, respond and share and follow us and let us know what you think. Thank you.